Hello again, and God be with you. Well, it's nice to be here again to tell you another story. As you know, our stories recently have been from the Old Testament, and the most recent stories have involved some young people and how they were doing what God wanted them to do. Today's story is another story about young people, but it's also from the New Testament. It's a story that Jesus told himself. So, as you know, we are all storytellers and we love to come into your school to tell you stories from the Bible. That's what it says here. Of course, at the moment, we're not allowed to go into the story. But we believe that Jesus was the best storyteller of all. And today we're going to tell you another of the many stories that Jesus told. So let's open the book and read the story called The Two Sons. When Jesus was telling his stories, there were often two different groups of people who gathered to listen. The first group were the people who always seemed to get into trouble for doing the wrong thing. And whenever Jesus spoke about God his Father, they would shake their heads as if to say, "We're so foolish, and we always seem to do what's wrong. How can God love us?" The second group were the people who thought that they were very good. So much so, in fact, that they made sure that everyone knew how good and wonderful they were. And whenever Jesus spoke about God his Father, they would nod their heads and point to themselves as if to say, "We're so wise and we always do what's right. God must be very pleased with us." So one day, making sure that both groups were listening, Jesus told them all a new story. There was once a man who had two sons. He also had a vineyard. On a hot, sunny day, the man approached his first son and said, "Nathan, I need you to do some work today. Please go to my vineyard and help harvest the grapes." But Nathan shook his head. "No, father, no way. I'm not going to the vineyard today. I want to play with my friends." And he headed off, away from the vineyard, towards the fields where he hoped his friends would be. The man went to his second son and said, "Luke, I need you to do some work today. Please go to my vineyard and help harvest the grapes." And Luke nodded his head and pointed to himself. "Yes, father, of course I will. I'd love to go to the vineyard today. There's nothing I'd like better." And he headed off towards the vineyard. But on the way there, Luke stopped and had a thought. Then he said to himself, "What am I doing? It's a beautiful day. I'd much rather be playing in the fields. The work can wait. I'm not going to the vineyard today." So he turned around and walked to the fields, hoping to meet some friends. Meanwhile, Nathan had also stopped, and he was also having a think. Then he said to himself, "What am I doing? I know it's a beautiful day, but my father asked me to work in the vineyard. The grape harvest can't wait. That's where I should be today." So he turned around and walked away from the fields, back to the vineyard, ready to work. "Now," said Jesus, "tell me, in the end, which one of the two sons did what his father wanted? Nathan, who first shook his head to say no, or Luke, who first nodded his head to say yes?" "Nathan," everyone answered. "He shook his head at first, but then he did what was right." "So listen," said Jesus. "There are some who at first nod their heads and point to themselves as if to say, we are always good, but when they hear God asking them to change their lives, they say no and head off in the wrong direction. And there are others who at first shake their heads as if to say, God cannot love us. But when they hear God asking them to change their lives, they turn around and end up going the right way after all. So in this story, Jesus showed us that whatever we think, whether we think we are good or whether we think we are bad, isn't important. The important thing is whether we choose to do what God asks us to do. Close your eyes and think about yesterday. Did you say anything you wish you hadn't? Did you do anything you wish you hadn't? Now I'm going to say a prayer, and if you want to make it your prayer, say Amen at the end. Dear God, help us to think about the things we say. Help us to think about the things we do. Help us to make the right choices today. Amen. Well, that's today's story. I think there's another group of people as well who understand that whilst they try to do things right, sometimes they don't. They get things slightly wrong. And I think we're all part like that. We're prepared to say we're sorry and we're going to try and be better next time. Well, have a nice week. I hope the sunny weather keeps going. And I'll see you next week. God bless you all.